Hi, this is the final film in a series of 5 films focusing around the MMU PSF. This film is particularly aimed at people applying for Principal Fellowship and will take you through the process of completing your application and give you some tips and hints as to how you can do this effectively.
This presentation is suitable for people who are considering writing a Principal Fellow application. In order to write your application, it is vital that you have an understanding of the UK PSF, or the UK Professional Standards Framework. And in order to do this, we've previously provided you with 2 podcasts that focus on, firstly, what is the UK Professional Standards Framework, and particularly what are the dimensions of practice that form this set of standards. And then secondly, what level of fellowship should I apply for? This will give you information about the requirements of Principal Fellow and allow you to ensure that you meet these requirements before starting your application. It's vital that you ensure that you understand the dimensions of practice within the UK PSF and particularly the ones that are pertinent to the level of Principal Fellow before you even start the process. Let's remind ourselves of those dimensions of practice. And these are divided into 3 categories. We have areas of activity, core knowledge and professional values. Areas of activity are then divided into 5 subcategories of activity. Core knowledge again is divided into 5 categories and professional values divided into 4 categories. And as a Principal Fellow, you need to demonstrate a clear understanding of these dimensions and a championing of these dimensions within your current practice. So let's have a look at the Principal Fellow and have a look at the requirements for Descriptor 4. So firstly, a Principal Fellow should be a highly experienced member of staff who can demonstrate a substantial knowledge of teaching and the support of learning. They need to be able to demonstrate a sustained record of strategic leadership in academic practice at a minimum of an institution-wide level. They also need to be able to demonstrate an influence on the development of high-quality student learning at, again, an institutional and/or a national and/or an international setting. And then finally, they need to demonstrate that their influence on teaching and learning has a clear impact on the quality of education within at least the institutional level. If we look at the descriptors for a D4 or Principal Fellow, firstly, you need to demonstrate an active commitment to and championing of the dimensions of the framework through your work with students and staff and through institutional developments. Secondly, you need to show successful strategic leadership that has produced an enhancement of student learning and particularly but not exclusively focused on enhancing teaching quality in an institutional and/or national or international setting. You need to have established effective organisation policies and/or strategies for supporting and promoting others in delivering high quality teaching and the support of learning. You need to champion within the institution an integrated approach to academic practice and also demonstrate a sustained and successful commitment to and engagement with your own CPD in relation to academic, institutional and other professional practices. So there are 5 key descriptors that you need to engage with within your application for Principal Fellowship. So let's have a look at the application process. The first part of the application process is to produce an experience grid that demonstrates your engagement with those 5 descriptors. And here we have an example from a Principal Fellow application. Down the left hand side here we have examples of professional practice, and then across the top here we have each of the descriptors, and what happens is that the applicant cross-references each of their activities down the left hand side here with each of the descriptors. It's useful under the D1 column here to break it down into each of the dimensions of practice. That shows your understanding and engagement with each of these dimensions, and in the right hand column here to add dates to show your sustained and current level of engagement. Then you will progress on to your next part of your application, which is the demonstration of professional activities related to the dimensions of practice and the descriptors. You can choose whether to do a written presentation or an oral presentation, and the presentation will focus on you writing 3 case studies that demonstrate your engagement with the descriptors for Principal Fellow. Within these cases, you need to demonstrate currency, so that you are currently engaged in these strategic leadership activities. You need to show sufficiency, so that you have done this on more than one occasion. And finally, you need to demonstrate an impact at a minimum of an institutional level. We suggest that this might be a format that you might want to use within each of your case studies. So first of all, you describe the strategic leadership activity, linking that with the descriptors for D4. So you're going to be saying exactly and summarising exactly what you've been doing. Then you can discuss and justify how you perform the activity and why you perform it in that way. And this will give you the opportunity to link this to an understanding and of the underpinning theory for leadership and teaching and learning assessment theory. And it will give you the opportunity to talk about your personal philosophy and values. Finally, you will evaluate the strategic impact of the activity you're discussing. And within this, you need to provide evidence and proof of impact and show that this results in high quality teaching, learning and assessment experience for students. This evidence may follow the form of quotes from colleagues, quotes from external reviewers, quotes from people who you have worked with in relation to providing this strategic leadership. It might show changes in institutional performance, such as changes in the NSS that have resulted from policies and procedures that you've implemented. But it basically needs to provide sufficient evidence to prove the impact of your strategic activities. Here we've got an example of strategic leadership. So in the blue text here, we have a description of an activity around being involved through a PSRB role in accreditation of overseas programs. In the orange, we've got a description of what this entailed. In the reddy brown, we have some evidence of the actual impact of these activities briefly, and in the blue here we've got some further description of the activity, and then the actual impact was also evidenced through a link to newspaper publicity and a link to the external institution webpage. So here you can see how this person has used the cycle we've described earlier to evidence their strategic leadership. Okay, now let's consider the final part of the application, which is the references. First thing is you need to have 3 references, and each of these referees need to have first-hand experience of your current role. Their main role is to validate the information that you've put within your application and within your case studies. So they need to have experienced and have worked with you on these activities. One of your referees must be external to MMU, and we do recommend that one of your case studies at least focuses on an activity that is outside of your current role within MMU. They need to be able to clearly validate the experience and the evidence you are demonstrating within your application process. So think carefully about who you choose to carry this out. And finally, they need to be familiar with the UK PSF and the requirements of principal fellowship, because they have to demonstrate that they are able to support your engagement with the UK PSF. After you have completed your actual application, whether this be written or a presentation, there is an additional requirement that you take part in a 30-minute professional discussion with the panel. And this forms a collegial discussion that's stimulated by the case studies you've presented. And it provides the panel with the opportunity to gain more evidence on your engagement with the descriptors and the associated literature, and, if required, to gain further evidence of impact. And this will take the form of a discussion around the key topics that you've presented within your presentation. If you need further support in developing your application, we recommend firstly that you complete an expression of interest form and send that through to us at the email address at the bottom of this slide. This will get you actually recognised within the scheme and will give you a slot on an appropriate panel. If you access the CALT webpage, you will also find further tips and hints, and you'll find a downloadable handbook that you can download, and that contains again tips and hints in preparing your application. We also provide drop-in sessions where you can book an appointment with one of the CALT mentors to talk through your application process. If you're unable to attend a drop-in, you can also email us through again the PSF web link here and book an appointment directly with the PSF lead. We also provide writing retreats where you can actually come and get away from your desk for the day and actually sit and write your application. And we would very strongly recommend that you let the PSF lead have a copy of your draft application and enable her to provide you with feedback before you submit your final application.